Okay. I think it's recording now. When I first read the article, I immediately looked up the definition between burnout and demoralization because I was like, oh, that's interesting. And I actually wasn't even sure if I knew the definition of demoralization. So did you have to do?
Yeah, I've heard of them separately, but I never really thought about them as being similar or even applying to teachers, even though you hear all the time about teachers need to be treated better and they need to be respected more. I never really even thought of the word demoralization when I think about me, at least. Burnout, I feel like I've heard my entire life, whether it's about teaching or other people in other jobs.
Yeah, because if you look up burnout, it just says it's a state of emotional, physical, and mental exhaustion caused by excessive and prolonged stress. And then the demoralization was to deprive a person of spirit, courage, discipline, or destroy the morale of it. So I feel like those are huge words when you get into talking about destroying the morale and stuff. So one of the things that I had to write in my class was about if I understand the differences between them and then what I think is more accurate in why teachers are leaving the profession. And I talked about personally that everyone's like, oh, I'm so burnt out. And I know that when I left the classroom for 16 months, it obviously was because of emotional and grief and all of that. But getting back into it, it was really hard because I was like, oh, I'm just so burnt out. But I feel like as moms, I'm always excessively tired. So that's hard to say. But then all of the stressors and the extra part of things that especially when I was in the charter school, all of the very detailed lesson plans that we had to put up, they decided what we had to put on all of our bulletin boards. And when we changed them and there were zero freedoms in the charter school setting, at least the one that I was in. So then I was like, well, I think demoralization might be what causes people to feel the physical and mental stresses of that. So I think both are to blame, but I think in the end, it's we can't handle the physical stress of being that tired, of dealing with it and trying to stay on top of it, on top of educating 100+ kids a semester and then going home to our families and being actual functioning people in society.
Yeah. And one thing I didn't really think of is in the article it says the burnout narrative comes down to, sorry, you blew it, you couldn't hack it, you didn't preserve yourself. And I've never, when I think of burnout, whether it's a specific teacher I know or myself, I've never thought it's because of me. I've always thought it's, like you said, outside stressors. So to me, when she mentioned that, I was really kind of surprised because I've never thought of it. But maybe when someone retires or quits and says, I'm done, I'm burnout, maybe I wonder, do other people think, oh, well, you just couldn't handle it? That's something I've never thought of other people's perspectives like that before.
Because even when I was in school, people would always say don't go into teaching, you make no money. And then for the most part, everybody's response is well, I'm not going into it for the money. And when you're in the position when and I'm not sure if it was part of the book that I'm reading for that class, The Well-Balanced Teacher. One of the first opening chapters is about how if you look up the most stressful jobs in any sort of survey or research, teaching is very highly ranked. And so I was questioning, I'm well, why is that? And a lot of it was just talking about how they're not respected, they're not paid well enough to do their job or to meet ends meet in their personal lives. And then you have to go out and provide all of these extra things that you have to go buy in order to do your job effectively. Even if we're not getting paid enough, we're still spending more money usually. I mean, it's been a little different in the middle school setting for me, but when I was in my own classroom with 30 kids all day long, I was spending a lot of money on just being able to run centers and get all of the RTI time in that I needed to get in, and all of the individualized remediation stuff and groups and circles and like everything that I was like required to run just was not provided for. So I mean, I feel like when you go into it, people are always like, you don't make enough money, but it's like, it's so much more than that. And I mean, the statistics are like, I forget however many, but so many people leave like within their first 3 years. So it's like, is it the burnout or the demoralization? Like, is there just so much on our plates that, and it's getting worse? I mean, like now stuff is focused so much on like test scores and stuff like that, I mean, I haven't felt it so much here yet, about the like pressure with test scores, or not having autonomy, because I feel like we have a lot of it, and I don't know if that's just us. I don't know if it's administration. I don't know. I don't know what that is, but I feel like, especially when you take the autonomy out of it, it really does like kill the morale and like destroy everything, because you are so afraid of like stepping out of line that you can't like do what what you want to do or what you like have a passion for doing. I don't know.
And thinking about how you said with so many people quitting within the first few years, I wonder if I was not a teacher, and I feel like I hear comments from other teachers about like not so much burnout, but they realize that we're demoralized and say, well, I couldn't be a teacher because you're not treated well enough or you don't get paid enough. So with the shortage of teachers now, I wonder if that is because of some of the demoralization, where maybe once you're in it, you get burnt out and you just put up with the demoralization, but maybe we're not getting as many teachers because of the demoralization.
Definitely. And not only that, like in the media, like in general, like anywhere you go, when people start talking about like teachers, like how stressed they are and like how bad they have it, or there's strikes and like all of that, I feel like for sure the media sets like a negative tone on it, which kills like people entering the profession before they even get started. So
because I think I saw numbers from MSU maybe, where I forget over the past how many years, but they're graduating a third of the amount of teachers that they had been graduating.
I mean, when I graduated, which was not that long ago, from college even, I was like, when I started applying for jobs, I was applying for jobs with like 300 applicants. Like there was so much more like of a competition, and like even getting your foot in the door, like you had to know somebody. And I mean, granted, this is not the same for everybody, but like I pretty much walked into this position because they were like begging for people. And I feel like the last 3 jobs I've gotten, they've been begging, like, come to us, come to us, come to us. So I don't know. I had the article up here too. I was reading something too about, I think it was part of this. One of the side quotes was talking about resilience in teachers, and it's usually centered around self-care, and how like she says, I believe in self-care, but that's an insufficient and entirely too passive way to address the problems teachers are encountering today. And then I know in social media, a lot of people have been talking about like, what does self-care even mean? Like instead of people like reframing that and saying like going to bed, having a healthy diet, getting exercise, like daily professional development, or reading things that like make you happy, all of those things that like get your mind right and like your body right. That's like the actual self-care, like the hard work, whereas like going to get a pedicure or like going out to eat with your friends, like that's, or locking yourself in the bathroom for a few minutes, like that's not actual like true self-care. And I feel like that's
more relaxing. People don't. It takes a lot of work to do the actual self-care, whereas the relaxing part of it, you don't have to put as much effort into.
Right. And I was reading a book on, it's called Scoot Over and Make Some Room, which is written by a mom that has 3 adopted children, 2 with Down syndrome. And so she basically writes this big book on inclusion, not just like in the school setting, just in general, like everybody should be like scooting over and making room for all different types of people in their life, and different opinions and stuff like that. But she talks about self-care in a way of like how it's just so focused on like middle class people that can afford self-care. Like, sure, like you love to like go out and get pedicures, but for some moms, they're single mothers or like they don't make enough money. They can't go out and do those kinds of things. So they're just like running on like literal empty tanks because they can't do things like that. And so that people should like start reframing the way that they say that they're like taking care of themselves for like what it actually is. But
and I think that's something before becoming a teacher and in my college classes, which have been quite a while now, they never, like, self-care wasn't a phrase that was ever used. You knew you'd have papers to grade outside of class, but you didn't realize the mental toll. Like, before I had kids, I literally just thought about work all day long. I dream about work. I wake up in the middle of the night and write things down for my to-do list. And now the only reason I think I don't is because I'm too busy with my own kids that I just mentally, I have to focus on my own kids. So it's given me a mental break from work, but I'm still busy dealing with being a mom. Whereas I think of the new teachers who have even more pressure on them, that if I was at that point where I was still thinking about work all day long and never having a break, it would be so hard.
I feel like it comes down to like personality too, because like I have a friend who's been teaching about the same amount of time as me, but she is like constantly doing something for her classroom, like going way above and beyond. Like she's very like type A, to-do list, perfectionist. Like she has to have like the Pinterest, like parties, gifts, like everything. And I used to tell her, I'm like, she's like, how do you do it? How do you just like go home and like shut it off? I'm like, because I literally have to go home and shut it off. Otherwise I would be like you and just be completely run down and like crazy all the time because you're not like turning off your brain. And like, there are things that we can do to like go above and beyond, or things that we can do to be more effective in the classroom, or things that we can do to make things more fun. But like, it doesn't have to be like 100 all of the time. And like she,
I think too, figuring out, because at first I thought of it this way, is like, is this me coming across as lazy? But really, if you think the amount of hours or effort you're putting into something, like for me, it would be finding the perfect cultural video. And I could spend 2 to 3 hours and not find what I want, or maybe finally at the end of that, find what I want for a 2-minute video. And it's like, is all that work really worth that 2-minute video? Or is there a better way to go about it? Or are there better resources I can use rather than figuring it out on my own? And so at first it seemed like, well, I'm just being lazy, but it's really more about being efficient and knowing what is worth putting your time and effort into and what isn't. Because I would love to be a Pinterest teacher, mom too. And every year I say, my room's going to have this and it's going to have that. And I get so many ideas of systems I want to do and procedures and this and that. And then it's not practical to implement all that.
And that specific person, I feel like that is like a case of being burnout. Like she's just trying to do so many things that aren't required of her, that she physically and mentally is just like exhausted in like what she's doing. So I think that that's a completely different scenario where she's like feeling that burnout on her own end. Whereas like some of these people actually have like deep rooted, like killing and destroying of morale and, not being able to do the things that they're like passionate for because of like laws or because of rules like set in place like through their districts and stuff. So, and they talk in here about remoralization, like involving educators and initiatives to find solutions. Whenever teachers are brought in to investigate and develop interventions, we're creating opportunities for authentic community and taking action. And unions can be an incredible source of support for teachers. So when I first came here and I asked about the union, I was told that like not many people from the middle school are involved in that. Like it's usually, when I feel like that was at the last district I was at too, it's usually lower and then like the high school. And so I wonder like where that comes in, because like I said, in the elementary, I feel like I had so many other like pressures put on me. And rules and regulations and all of like the read before 3 and like all of those things that were happening for like intervention that needed to happen almost immediately in kindergarten, first grade, second grade, all that stuff like really added up and like killed any time you had to like have that autonomy. Right. And then like in the high school, I feel like they're a part of the union because of athletics and things like that are like getting their kids like all these big scholarships and stuff like that a lot of like the teachers and coaches up there care about. So I wonder why middle school is like so disconnected.
For our staff specifically, so years ago, when you became a teacher, you had to be in Michigan, you had to be in the union no matter what. You didn't have a choice. And then when they became the right to work in our district, a lot of people were like, well, and this was with previous superintendent, we were on pay freezes. We really didn't see any gains as far as what our union was doing locally for us. So a lot of people felt it was a waste of money. And now with a different superintendent, that could totally change. But because people have already gotten out of it, and we were just talking about this yesterday in our PLC, is that our numbers are so low in our district that eventually we could just not even have a union. That's when we're going to get into trouble. We're not really in trouble yet because we have enough members that we still have a negotiating team. But if we get to the point where we don't have a union, we're going to be in big trouble. But by then it will be too late because everyone already gave up.
So how do you change that? Like what, like, I don't even know. I mean, I haven't been in the district long enough to know like what they're asking for, but some of the comments and stuff I've been reading after this article talk about how the article like really expresses why the system has like such frustrating aspects of it, like just the system and overarching aspect of like education, especially in America and in the public school system. But that like no matter what, like the people that like stay in it are in it for the job and for the students. And so I don't know if it really has so much to do with like resilience, but I feel like that is hard to like wonder, like if when you're feeling that burnout because of all of the overarching like things in the system, like one, is it true burnout because you're putting too much like pressure on yourself, or two, is it actual demoralization where you just are not able to do the things that you like love and are passionate about because of the system in general. So,
and I do think with the previous superintendent, we did feel demoralized here. And there were, like you said, kind of rules put in place that we were never told, that were, handed down the line. So we were told them, for example, one was we were not allowed to eat at staff meetings or during our planning hours, which was an issue for some teachers because some give up their lunch to help kids. So
you couldn't eat during your planning.
So it was so ridiculous when our principal told us. We thought he was joking and even laughed because at our after school meetings, we would have snacks and eat sometimes during that time. And we were told we weren't allowed to do that anymore. And it was one of those things where it's such a minor, we almost felt so micromanaged that they didn't trust us. Like, do you think we're just hanging out having parties instead of actually working? Whereas I feel like with our planning time, we've always had flexibility of like, oh, you forgot something, you need to run to the store and pick it up on your planning time. But you're a professional, so what you would have done during your planning, just stay after school to get done. And a lot of that trust seemed to have been broken. And that was before I got here, and I've been here for almost 10 years. And there's people that still have that deep-rooted mistrust because now things are so different. It's almost too good to be true that they're just waiting for something to fall apart. So I feel like they haven't got burnout because maybe they are, like you said, they have that resilience.